Deep in the heart of the forest, there was a small town where people had lived for generations. But the townsfolk always warned outsiders not to venture too far into the forest, for they believed that it was cursed. One night, a group of friends decided to explore the forest despite the warnings. As they wandered deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to grow thicker and the air grew colder. They soon realized that they had lost their way and were hopelessly lost. As the night wore on, they heard strange noises coming from the forest. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but then they heard whispers and footsteps that seemed to follow them wherever they went. The fear in their hearts grew stronger with each passing moment. As they stumbled through the forest, they came across a small cabin that seemed to appear out of nowhere. It was old and decrepit, with boarded-up windows and a rusted door. But it was the only shelter they had, so they decided to go inside. As soon as they stepped inside, they felt a cold breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. They huddled together, trying to keep warm, and then they heard a creaking sound coming from upstairs. They slowly made their way up the stairs, and as they reached the top, they saw a figure standing in the shadows. The figure slowly turned around, revealing a face that was twisted with madness. The friends screamed in terror and tried to run back down the stairs, but the door was now locked from the outside. The figure slowly approached them, its eyes gleaming with a terrifying intensity. They were trapped with no way out. Suddenly, they heard a loud banging on the door, and a voice calling out their names. It was the search party that had been sent out to find them. As the search party broke down the door, the figure disappeared into the shadows, never to be seen again. The friends were rescued, but they knew that they had narrowly escaped with their lives. From that day on, they never ventured into the forest again, for they knew that the curse of the forest was real. It was a beautiful day in the forest, and a group of hikers decided to explore the trails. The sun was shining, and the birds were singing, but as they walked deeper into the forest, they began to feel a sense of unease. As they walked, they noticed that the trees were getting thicker and taller, and the sunlight was getting blocked out. Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound in the bushes, and they stopped in their tracks. They looked around, but couldn't see anything. They continued on, but the feeling of unease persisted. The forest seemed to be getting darker and more ominous by the minute. As they walked, they noticed strange symbols etched into the tree bark, and they heard whispers in the wind. Suddenly, they came across a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing, there was an old cabin, and smoke was rising from the chimney. The group cautiously approached the cabin, and as they got closer, they noticed that the door was slightly ajar. As they entered the cabin, they felt a chill run down their spines. The cabin was dark and musty, with old furniture covered in cobwebs. Suddenly, they heard a creaking sound coming from upstairs. They cautiously made their way up the stairs, and as they reached the top, they saw a figure standing in the shadows. The figure turned around, revealing a face that was twisted and deformed. It let out a blood-curdling scream, and the group turned and ran down the stairs as fast as they could. As they ran through the forest, they could hear the creature's footsteps getting closer and closer. They stumbled and fell, but managed to pick themselves up and keep running. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest, and they looked back to see the creature disappearing into the shadows. The group never forgot that day in the forest. They knew that they had encountered something evil and otherworldly, and they made a vow to never venture into that forest again. This story is a true story that happened to my dad, who we will call John, when he was serving as a young police officer in the 90s. I've only heard the story one time, as he doesn't like to talk about it to this day, as the events that occurred disturbed him so much. Now my dad is a big guy, being 71 and over 225 pounds. He was in his mid-20s at the time. Now being a police officer, it was John's job to patrol the streets, especially the worn, dusty roads in the back of town. Mind you, the houses back there are few and far between, and are very secluded, as this area of town is covered by woods and are at least 20 minutes from the rest of civilization. When John was patrolling one of the roads in the back of town, it was just after nightfall, and the area became extremely dark around him. While driving, John suddenly saw a little girl standing on the side of the road, not far from the trees that line the woods. The girl was described as being between 6 and 9 years old, and was wearing a white gown and was barefooted. Of course, John stopped his car, immediately seeing this little girl in the middle of nowhere after dark with no one else around. He called it in over his radio what he saw and stepped out of the car to talk to the girl. He never saw her face, as she had long hair that mostly covered it, and he could not make out anything distinctive, though when he called to the girl to come to him, and that he was a police officer and there to help her, she ran from him and went into the dark woods. John followed her into the woods, calling out to her to stop, and what was strange, though, is that he was never able to catch up to the little girl. In the dark woods, all he could see was a trail of her white gown flitting between trees, leading him deeper and deeper into the woods. The girl led him directly into a clearing in the woods, where he saw brick steps that led to nowhere. Right there in the middle of the clearing, as John looked around, the little girl was nowhere to be found. The clearing was so large and open that there would have been no way the girl could have run and him not see her. A sudden sense of dread and fear filled him as he realized it was impossible for the girl to just disappear out of thin air, and that this girl was a ghost. John turned around and ran as fast as he could back to his car on the road, and had to tell the dispatcher on the radio what happened, as he had initiated the report when he first saw the girl. Though embarrassed to tell dispatch what happened, he did, and was surprised to hear that he wasn't the first officer who reported seeing the same little girl. Apparently, many officers for years had seen the little girl in white and chased her into the woods to the same mysterious set of stairs to lead to nowhere. It was hard for me to get this story out of my dad, as he does not believe in things like ghosts. Even though this happened to him almost 30 years ago, I've never been able to get him to retell this story, as he likes to pretend it never happened.